Okay guys, Mike here. Welcome back to One Man Op Fishing. I'm actually in my office, at my office. And today I just want to talk a little bit about braid versus mono versus fluoro. And I don't like to use the versus in the title only because it implies that we're pitting them against each other. All of them have benefits, all of them have flaws. If you watch my videos, you know that I'm kind of a braid guy. And it also depends on, what kind of fishing you do. I fish from the bank a lot. So when you're bank fishing, that can determine what kind of line you use. It makes a big difference. If you're in a boat and you're fishing with mono and you get caught on a piece of structure, a tree limb, you could paddle the boat over or motor the boat over and free yourself. If I'm standing on the bank and I cast it out 30, 40, 50 yards, across the bank or into deep water and I get caught on a rock or something, I don't have that option. Let me say this about the three. If you're just getting started in fishing, I would use monofilament. I think that's a good base for beginning fishermen. I used mono from the time I could walk and hold a pole up until probably my mid to late 20s. That's when braid was, I guess, more or less invented, at least for freshwater fishing. If you're just getting started in fishing and you're trying to get set up at a decent price, you don't want to spend $500 on rods, reels, line, lures, hooks, weights. Monofilament's still the least expensive. You can go get a big roll of 300 feet or 500 feet for 10 bucks, 15 bucks, whatever it might. You can buy the top of the line mono for just a few dollars. So I would start with that. Mono is good for a beginner because it does have quite a bit of stretch. So let's talk about that. Mono will stretch up to about 25% according to the research that I've seen, which is about up to 1 inch per foot. So think about that. If you've got 30 feet of line out and you go to set that hook, you're going to get quite a bit of stretch. Now, what is the benefit of that? The benefit is if you're a brand new fisherman, okay, you got to work on your sensitivity to a strike, okay? There's a very different feeling from mono to fluoro to braid, which is the most sensitive when you feel a fish strike. You're gonna make mistakes in the beginning. You're gonna think something's maybe tugging on your line if you're using braid, which is super sensitive, and it's not. It's a piece of structure, it's a rock. You're pulling it along the bottom, maybe you're using a Texas rig. So the mono is gonna give you a little elasticity. It's going to give you a little more forgiveness in terms of breaking off if you set the hook hard on something. But at the same time, it's not real sensitive. It's a plus and it's a minus. It's a plus if you're just getting started, perhaps, and you're trying to get used to fishing. And you're going to miss some fish in the beginning. Everybody does. Just keep at it. And after a while, you'll know exactly what that strike feels like. So, also, it's got quite a bit of memory. When you stretch monofilament, after a while it will stay stretched. But the benefit of that is it's inexpensive. So if you need to cut 30 feet of line out of your mono, you're not going to feel like you spent $12 or $15 on 150 feet of line, and now you're having to cut a big stretch of it off. So that's the benefit of the cheap mono. But if you're a beginning fisherman and you're just trying to get used to your tackle, try and get used to whatever it is you enjoy fishing with, I would start with mono, okay? That's my feelings on mono. Let's talk about fluoro next. I'm not a huge fan of fluoro. They say that the biggest advantage to fluorocarbon is that it's nearly invisible. Again, from the research I have seen, they say fluoro and mono is about the same in visibility. I'm not convinced, from what I've looked at, that fluoro to a bass is any clearer than mono, okay? And again, they're both clear. They both look about the same. If you put both pieces in a glass of water and look at them, now again, you're using human eyes. Bass have a different color pattern. They're dichromatic, so they're gonna see things a little bit differently. But especially like in low visibility, if you're fishing darker water, it doesn't really matter. Down here in Florida, most of the water I fish is fairly clear. You probably have visibility down to the bottom, 5-6 feet at times, which is fairly clear water. So the fluoro is very clear. They say one of the benefits is it has less stretch than mono. Not from what I've looked at. From what I've looked at and from using it recently, the stretch feels about the same to me, the mono and the fluoro. So I don't think there's any benefit in sensitivity with fluoro. Just keep that in mind. Fluorocarbon, its main benefit supposedly is that it's clearer. It's more expensive than mono, not as expensive as Braid. It does sink, which if you're using a crankbait or something else that you want to get down, fluorocarbon would help you there. It's not completely invisible. As I said, it's probably as invisible as mono, maybe a little bit more, but how much invisibility do you truly need? There are plenty of anglers out there catching fish on straight braid, because there's other questions you have to ask yourself about visibility. What I really don't like about fluorocarbon is the memory. You know, you put it on your reel, and I'm using some right now. If you've seen my past few videos, I have been using fluorocarbon. I bought a new reel, put it on a new rod, or a rod that I had for a little while, but basically new. And every time you cast it out, man, it wants to unspool on you. Again, I am casting a long distance from the bank. In some cases, I'm casting all the way across the canal or the lake, and you know, I'm constantly readjusting my reel to make sure I don't bird's nest, because who wants that? Because once you put it on, it gets used to it, and then it wants to spiral off on you. So you have to make sure your magnetic brake is down a little bit more so you don't cause a bird's nest. Even with the Shimano SLX DC that I use, which has the automatic braking. Okay, Braid is the last one. Now again, if you're fishing from the bank, okay, then I think personally, I believe Braid is the way to go. Simply because you need something stronger. I personally fish with the spider wire, the castable one, I forget what they call it, but it's a 30-pound. I use a white. I like being able to see the line when I'm fishing. In case something picks it up and starts to swim, I can see it move. And then what I do is I take a black magic marker and I will blacken out the first 6 feet or 8 feet of the line before I tie it. So the Braid works well for me because I'm constantly casting into, again, from the bank into cover. A lot of eelgrass where I fish, so I'm constantly having to pull my worm or whatever I'm fishing through that, and I need the extra strength. I just do. You know, sometimes I'll get caught and I'm pulling and tugging, and what actually happens is, because I've been using a thinner hook, I'll actually bend the hook out sometimes, which is better than losing your whole rig. You know, you just retie a new hook or bend that hook back into place, as long as you have the sharp point still, excuse me, and you're good to go. So my feeling is a straight Braid for bank fishermen. Here's another benefit. If you've used mono or fluoro before, and now you've gone to a Braid, and you don't have to use 30-pound. If you want to go ultra light, you can use 10-pound Braid. You've got as much strength as 10-pound mono or fluoro. It's going to come off your reel really nice. It's going to be very thin, nearly invisible in the water. You can use a moss green or a white or any color and blacken it out. And we'll talk about what colors bass can see in another video. The benefit of Braid, the biggest benefit in my opinion, isn't even the strength. It is the near zero stretch. Braid only stretches about 1 to 8%, so very little stretch. So when I'm bringing that through cover, when I'm bringing it over a rocky bottom in a lot of these lakes I fish, and again, this is how I fish, okay? I can feel everything. I can feel whether the bottom is soft. I can feel whether it's a lot of rocks. I can feel whether I'm bringing it through grass. All of that. If I get caught on a piece of hydrilla or on a lily pad, I can break that free without having to snap my line and then retie, because who wants to keep doing that? And there are days when you're going to feel like the bug instead of the windshield when you're out there. I mean, every fourth cast you're getting caught on something, and the Braid really saves you in those instances. And then there are times you'll go out and you won't get caught on a thing. So that's really nice. One of the drawbacks that I hear some people talk about with Braid is they can't get their knots to hold. I don't understand that at all. Again, I'll tie a Palomar knot, or what I call a modified Palomar knot, where I bring the hook through twice. I cinch that down, or a uni knot with 7 or 8, 10 turns. I put a little drop of super glue on all my knots, and that's it. I have never lost a fish from a not failing with Braid or any of my line. I've been putting super glue on it for 30 plus years, probably longer than that. Let me think, anything else that I wanted to talk about? Okay, yes, when it comes to, and again, this gets a little more complicated, but we're gonna wrap it up. Are there some applications that you shouldn't use Braid for? Let me say this. You could watch 100 videos on YouTube or any other channel, and you could hear fishermen tell you, don't use Braid with crankbaits, jerkbaits, don't use Braid in clear water, whatever it might be. Then you're gonna go to another channel where the guy loves Braid and he has no problem with it. I was just watching a couple videos before shooting this one, and two famous fishermen whose names you would know, one saying don't use Braid on crankbaits, jerkbaits, topwater lures, swim baits, or even a Texas rig, which I don't understand at all. I've been using Braid on my Texas rigs, I don't know, since Braid was invented. That's what I use it for. Don't use Braid on a Texas rig. That's what I like to use it on. And I've caught, just watch my videos. You see me catching fish all the time. And I always tell you how long it takes me. I like to give you the time lapse, because if it's an hour and a half and I catch 6 fish, that's a lot of fish in an hour and a half. Sometimes I only catch 1. If I catch 0, because I do the walk of shame to show that I caught 0 fish in the time allotted. Usually an hour and a half is my minimum. So this fisherman was saying not to use Braid, and I understand why. He was saying to use either mono or fluoro in those applications. Why? Because when you're fishing, say, a Rapala crankbait or a jerkbait, and that fish comes up and hits it hard, and you set the hook, you want a little stretch, okay? Same thing with topwater. If you're using Braid for topwater, you have to be careful, but that's where being careful comes in. If you're using Braid for topwater or one of these crankbaits, which I use Braid for both applications, when I feel a fish hit, I don't whip back as hard as I can like I would with mono or fluoro, which is going to stretch. I give it just a little tug, with which Braid is plenty of hook set. Remember, these are treble hooks usually, and they're hanging out there. Usually the bass will impale himself when he hits it. Sometimes he'll come up and he'll miss the bait and hook his tail. That's when it feels like it's a 20-pound bass and it's a 2-pound bass, because he's swimming so strong. So I've used it in all those applications, but you do have to be more careful if you're going to use Braid on one of these, okay? Now, there is something that will solve almost all of your problems in terms of sensitivity and stretch. You can use a leader. How crazy do you need to get? But if you're going to use a leader, what I would suggest is you use Braid as your main line, okay? Braid is the main line, whatever size you find appealing, 10, 20, I prefer 30. I know guys that use 50, okay? There are guys who use 65 when they're punching through heavy cover out in the Everglades. My money, if you're going to use a leader, I would use monofilament. Why? Again, it's just as clear, according to the experts, as fluoro. It's less expensive, and it's got that stretch. The Braid has no stretch, so you're going to feel that strike really well, but you're going to have that little bit of give for when you set the hook. So maybe a 5, 8, maybe a 10-foot leader. It should come through your guides okay, as long as you're not using the micro guides, which I have one reel that does use those, or one rod rather that does use those, and I really like it. It's a lose. So that's my feeling on Braid, mono, and fluorocarbon. But there's nothing wrong. There's no wrong way to do things. As long as you're conscientious and you're being careful with how you hook set when it comes to certain applications, whether it's a crankbait or a jerkbait, you can use the Braid, but you got to be smarter with it. That's the main thing. So I hope you guys learned something with this. I know this was kind of a long talk. Maybe I'll edit it down, but we'll see. I hope there was some good information. It's just, again, my personal feeling on things. Other people have other opinions. Again, you'll find as many opinions out there as you'll have fishermen. So Mike here with One Man Out Fishing. I'll see you guys on the next vid. Have a good one.